Okay. Manika, Samita, keep it on the live, please.
Yes, ma'am, I'm doing.
And on behalf of Vicky, I welcome everybody on this webinar on learning from industrial accident. And I'm very thankful to DCPC Srivastav sir for his presence here, and Janardhan sir, our co-chairman of the committee, and from the SABIC, and all the speakers who have on the very short notice has agreed to our consent to be here and address everybody. And I request the moderator to please take over the lead and start officially the session. And we are on the live viewing on this platform, and shortly we'll announce the number of delegates who have joined on this platform. Thank you. And the moderator, please take on and please start the proceeding.
Thank you. Thank you, Rinki. Welcome all. This is Manish Panchal from DuPont Sustainable Solutions. And on behalf of DSS and FICCI, let me take this opportunity to welcome all the delegates and esteemed speakers present on this webinar that is aptly titled, Are We Learning from Industrial Accidents? This title is linked to Government of India's National Day Safety Day theme, that is learning from past incidents. Normally, we see three kind of people. One, who learn from mistakes by themselves. One who learn from others' mistakes. And there is definitely a third very notorious who says, I know everything, I never make mistake. I'm happy to hear today morning we had more than 400 people who are registered and in the audience who believe that they would want to learn from others' mistakes also. So we are on right track. We all know yoga is good for health, but how many of us really practice yoga on daily basis or every day? We all know, especially for those who are smokers, that smoking is injurious to health. But how many of us really find it easy to quit smoking even after so much of taxes? It's an expensive habit, or even government showing photographs of cancer on the box. Why I'm citing these two common but contradictory examples of human behavior? It's basically I'm trying to convey that any change happens with a spark in the mind, and it happens only when you are committed for yourself. And that's where the safety begins with self. Our objective for this event is to create that spark. And with this as a backdrop to ignite your thoughts, we have lined up a high-powered speakers on the panel, which include uh, the chief guest, Shri Kanish Kant Srivastava. He is Director of DCPC from Government of India. We have Dr. PSG Krishnan, Principal Director SIPMET from Bangalore, talking on learnings from styrene vapor release accident at LG Polymers. We all are aware of this as the most famous gas leak. Mr. Janardhanan Ramanjalu, Co-Chairman FICCI Petrochemical Committee and Vice President and Regional Head of SAPIC will speak on risk consideration in decision making across value chain. We have Mr. V.V. Surya Rao, Head Safety, Reliance Industries Limited. He'll talk on what more do we do while learning from incidents. It's going to be a very interesting session. And of course, the most important session, Rupert Saraswat is going to take and talk about business impact of safety incidents. To moderate this igniting session, we have our own Mr. Joseph Oman, Managing Director, DuPont Sustainable Solutions, to take it forward. And before I hand it over to Joseph, let me introduce very briefly. Mr. Joseph has 32 years of experience in manufacturing and supply chain in different types of industries. He is progressively responsible for leadership roles in manufacturing, operations, and corporate functions, starting with India, Singapore, US, and Asia Pacific. His last 7 years have been as regional director in China. During his career, he has proven his leadership skills in building and leading organizations in multicultural, regional, and global work environment, with core strength in EHS, cost management, quality, supply chain, production, manufacturing, technologies, projects, and he's a Six Sigma Master Black Belt. Let me take this opportunity to welcome you all again and hand it over to Joseph to take it forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Manish, and I welcome all the participants on this important session. I also welcome all our esteemed panel speakers. Welcome, sirs, and I look forward to a very powerful and engaging session in the next 1 hour or so. As you're all aware, the idea of commemorating the Foundation Day of the Safety Council was 4th of March, and this first National Day campaign was launched in 1972 and has since been organized every year. So this campaign is now entering the 49th year, and it is grown into a major national campaign widely celebrated by industry, trade unions, government departments, regulatory NGOs, institutions, and it has been actively supported by the central and state government. Having said that, unfortunately, there has been several serious incidents in India in these past 2 months of the year 2021. And we have also seen a number of severe, high impact, serious catastrophic incidents happening in the year 2022. As a result of these incidents, there is a huge impact to humans as well as to the business and to the environment. Many lives have been impacted permanently. My father used to work in a steel industry, and my fear was every day whether he'll come back home safely because of the nature of operations, the nature of risk happening. Similarly, in these incidents, several families have lost their beloved family members, husbands and wives, mothers and fathers who went to work in the morning, never came back home to their families. Some babies were lost in hospitals. Many people were hospitalized in critical condition with a long road to recovery. In addition to this, facilities have been destroyed and supply chains have been disrupted. Recently, there was a news on the web that one country has become a major importer of certain metal due to a large player being put out of service because of sustainability issues. So disruptions due to supply chain in the supply chain are a big impact for all business houses. And on top of that, we have environment, soil, air, and water getting contaminated, having long-term impact on the environment we are living in. So as we all know that the recent supply chain disruptions due to the pandemic has compelled companies around the world to think of diversifying their sourcing base, which has created a huge opportunity for India. It means that the entire supply chain of the industry, procurement, manufacturing, distribution, and logistics need to operate safely without any disruptions. The regulatory framework provides the policies and guidelines to manage these risks, but that is not enough. We as leaders in this industry, we have to take ownership to ensure that we have safe operations in each of our facilities. Now, the question in today's topic is, are we learning from industrial accident? This is a very important topic for us. How do we prevent such accidents from happening again in the future? Today, we have this panel of esteemed dignitaries from the government and the corporate world who will share their valuable experiences and perspectives for benefiting us all in participating in this webinar. So with this, I would like to invite our first speaker for this session, Dr. P.S.G. Krishnan. He is the Principal Director of CIPET Bangalore on the learnings from the styrene vapor release incident at LG Polymers India Private Limited. Dr. Krishnan is currently working as the Principal Director and Head in CIPET, School for Advanced Research in Petrochemicals in Bangalore. He did his MTech and PhD in the IIT New Delhi. He has worked as a research scientist for 5 years in IMRE Singapore. He has many research publications in reputed international journals and written several books. So, sir, you were recently part of the government's instituted high power committee to investigate and report on this incident. Could you share with us what happened on that early morning? Why did it happen? So over to you, Dr. Krishnan.
Can you unmute?
Thank you very much for giving a nice introduction. I think now you can share the slides so that I can start talking about the incident happened on 7th May in Vizag. Learnings from the styrene vapor release accident at LG Polymers India Private Limited. I will be talking about what has happened and what are the reasons for such an accident and how we can from such type of accidents again happening it. That I will discuss, and then we will look into that. Next slide. See, as far as the industrial accidents is concerned, India is having a very high death rate. If you see 2010, when compared to UK, it was very negligible amount, 397, and then Russia is also very much having on the higher side. And this is the statistics when compared with the different countries. We are very much on the higher side. And the next to that, I have given the slides which tells that how many of them have died over the period of year, right from 2010. At least on an average, every year, more or less close to 1,000 Indians are dying it due to such type of accidents. That we should look into that, why it is happening, and then what we have to learn from such accidents, because a wise man always learns from others' mistake, and we have to be wise so that such type of accidents will not happen, so that the human life is saved. Next, please. This accident related to styrene, it is not first time such type of styrene related accidents are happening. It has happened the first time in 1994 in Taiwan. That was due to the friction caused by erosions in the storage tank. Many times it has happened in Taiwan, either due to the truck pollutions or welding. And in the year 98, it happened in Japan. There was a rise in the temperature and pressure rise in the reactor. And then lastly, in USA, it has happened in 2005. At that time, it was due to the stationary railroad tank that has happened. And if you see in all the cases, even though there were many accidents right from 94, the fatality is very, very on the smaller side when compared to the Indian incident. Next, please. Yeah, the styrene vapor release, it happened on 7th May in LG Polymers Visakhapatnam. Sometimes the people only call it as a styrene gas leak, but the right term to use it is a styrene vapor leak, styrene vapor leak or styrene vapor release. It has happened on the early mornings of at about 2:30 a.m. in Visakhapatnam, and it affected roughly 3-kilometer radius. It killed 12 people and about 800 were hospitalized. And then it also leads to affecting the vegetations as well as the cattle were also killed. It is one of the unique incident in India, and it is a first of kind in India because there was a complete lockdown of the March until the May. Therefore, what has happened during this time, due to the complete lockdown, we have not thought what could happen because whatever these things were stored for a longer time, that was not thought about it. Therefore, it is of unique kind because we never thought that there will be a long lockdown due to COVID, and it was the unprecedented in Indian scenario. And most of the world, more than 50% of the world has gone for the lockdown. And what happened during this lockdown, they have not gone into that. They have not, in fact, predicted what could happen when styrene was stored for a longer time. Next, please. There were many reasons cited. The styrene was stored in the storage tank. And what happened is that initially, after the approval, maybe 4 or 5 years back, they changed the piping system. They modified the pipe, which in fact distributed the styrene recycling system. What happens that earlier, the refrigerator styrene was added at the top of the storage tank, and the temperature was measured at the bottom of the tank. Therefore, that could tell that what is the temperature difference that they were able to do that. What happened is that 2 to 3 years back, due to some renovation work was going on in that storage tank, they modified the piping system. As a result, what happens that the refrigerator styrene was also entering the storage tank at the bottom, and the temperature probe is also nearby. Therefore, they were not able to know what is happening at the top surface of the storage tank, because the storage tank had only one temperature probe, and that happened to be at the bottom. Due to the modifications of the tank, what has happened is that the temperature probe is not able to identify what is happening at the middle of the storage tank or what is happening at the top of the storage tank. Since the refrigerated styrene is also entering it, and then the measurement is also happening at the same place, they were not aware what is going on at the top. And another one problem with they were doing it, they were regularly refrigerating the storage tank from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. They were not doing it throughout the day, and this was not creating problem for them, because the styrene they were consuming it regularly. Hardly it stays for a few days. Therefore, that is nothing was happening it. But due to the lockdown, they were following the same SOP, that the storage tank only from 8 to 5 p.m. and they were not thought that it needs to be refrigerated throughout the day. That was not thought about these things. That was also one of the problem. One is that the measurement they could not do it because it's a faulty design, and they were doing only the measurement. What happens is that they were not refrigerating because they were thinking that just 8 hours duration of refrigeration is enough because everything is fine. But they never thought that when you go for the lockdown, the styrene will be stored for a longer time. Therefore, it will be exposed for a higher temperature. And it was also a summer time. Therefore, the outside temperature is also very high. Therefore, that also leads to the problem. Therefore, due to the lockdown, the styrene was not consumed for a longer time. As a result, what happened is that the oxygen level, which needs to be present at the overhead of the storage tank, was also deteriorating it, and then slowly the styrene gets polymerizing. Once the styrene starts polymerizing, there will be an exothermic reactions. As a result, heat is generated and it will start going further and further and leads to the runaway reactions. And then they were not having a proper monitoring device for measuring the dissolved oxygen level, because the dissolved oxygen level in the styrene is a very critical parameter that will prevent the runaway reactions. That was not properly measured, and there was not a monitoring device. They were drawing the sample storage tank and they were doing it, and that was also they lead to wrong informations, or that was misleading to them. And then the inhibitors which they were keeping it in the factory was very limited. They were thinking that the inhibitors is hardly required because they were regularly consuming the styrene. As a result, what happens that there was no need for them to put the inhibitors. But in this case, because it was not consumed for a longer time, it starts polymerizing, and there were not enough inhibitors, especially the mercaptans. They were not having enough that, and that were also leads to the accident. And then they were having siren which was working in conditions, and it was placed in places, but unfortunately this was not at all activated. Therefore, it will be better to have an automatic siren, so that the moment if anything goes wrong, it will immediately, the siren will start functioning it, and then it will activate, and it will also caution the neighbors and others, which was not there. And then if you see that the mock drill was carried out, but they never thought that for the emergency situations, the neighbors were not given proper training, And then they never thought that there will be a styrene vapor release. They were thinking that only for the fire and explosions, but they never thought about the styrene vapor release, and there was no emergency plans. These are some of the major reasons for the such an accident has happened. Another thing, that the factory, when it was started, there were the buffer zones in and around the factory, but over a period of time, what happens that a lot of people started occupying the in and around areas, and leads to more people staying very close to the factory. And that also one of the reasons that for a lot of almost 12 people killed in that incident. That is what, therefore, what I would like to say that in order to prevent such type of accidents happening, whenever there is an unprecedented situations like a complete lockdown, the factory needs to see in a different angle, rather carrying out the existing SOP that everything is fine, therefore I will have a limited inhibitor or limited refrigeration is enough. Those should not be carried out, and such type of unprecedented events or happenings that in the factory, they should think about modifying the SOP. They should do a lot of brainstorming, and then they should see that they should further strengthen their SOPs, and then they should also do further investigate, further brainstorming among themselves, and then they should also help the employees as well as those who are staying in and around that. This is what I would like to say, that this is an incident happened. It was really an unfortunate these things, but let us learn from them. Let us learn from this accident, that we have to do a lot of things, and we have to educate the people. And whenever we have the we should give a proper training. Regular training is also needed to be given, and especially to handle with the emergency situations, they should have adequate experience, and then adequate exposure training should be given to the employees, which was also not there in the LG Polymers Limited. Therefore, these are some of the problems they were having it. And let us see that whenever the tank gets modified, let us do again a proper validations. We will do that, and we will have a multiple temperature probes. We will keep it so that the proper temperature monitoring will be there, and we have to do such type of sufficient modifications, and then things to be done. And then this is what we have to learn, because it's really an unfortunate incident. Learn from the mistakes which has happened, and let us be wise. Thank you very much. And if you have queries, I will be able to answer at the end of the session.
Thank you, Dr. Krishnan, for the sharing. And as we all talk about in the safety model about Swiss cheese, number of holes in the Swiss cheese lined up, very many layers of protection lined up and failed, so that this incident, catastrophic incident, happened. So it's really a reinforcement for us to take process safety management very clearly, diligently, and process hazard analysis, if done properly with scenario planning, could prevent, like we can always say, all these incidents can be preventable. Thank you, Dr. Krishnan. With that, I'd like to move to our next speaker, Mr. Janardhanan Ramanajulu, whom we affectionately call Mr. JR. In his current role, he leads the region of South Asia, comprising the Indian subcontinent, South Asian countries, and Australia, New Zealand. And Mr. JR has been in many different boards of the company in different countries, and currently is the SABIC Asia Pacific chairman. In his 35 years of experience in the chemical industry, he has been in leadership positions across the whole value chain of a complex business. So Mr. JR will be sharing on the topic of risk considerations in decision making across the supply chain. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Joseph, and good morning to all of you. And this is a big subject, actually. The entire value chain, when we say, is a huge subject, but I will try to do justice in about 10 minutes. To start with, at the center, the heart of it is chemical process and chemical manufacturing. This is usually the safest part of the entire value chain. Why so? Because you have the site which is designed for it, the assets are of proper design, you have safety mechanism, you have mitigation possibilities, you have trained people in a factory or in a manufacturing site, and you do have all the alarm systems which work together in a manufacturing. But excepting barring these rare occasions when during a lockdown with the incident which Mr. Krishnan explained. Now, but if you think of chemicals are not just being only handled and processed and used within a site and that's the end of the story. They need to come from somewhere and they need to go somewhere and somebody need to use it in a certain way. And that is the extended value chain. And that's a pretty large kind of a frame. Can we afford to only focus on our manufacturing sites and say that we did everything to be safe in our manufacturing sites, and does that end our responsibility? The answer is actually no, because the weak links are in the entire value chain, the logistics, the transportation, the storage, the in between. Yeah, as an example, my favorite example, just to make it visually easily understandable for people, you find a lot of water tankers going around in many cities and you see how much of water spills. Can you consider a single chemical tanker spilling like that on the way and what it could mean? It's not possible. So there needs to be a specialized attention for the entire logistics, transportation, storage, as well as during transportation, unloading. I can tell you, even offloading and loading trigger accidents. And very simple, I can start with, let's say, there are a lot of products produced locally, but a lot of our feedstock, raw materials also come from overseas. We all know that the minute the ship is loaded, the title transfers to the buyer in India. So you are responsible for safety in a ship which is just decoupled from the supplier somewhere thousands of miles away. And then it is on the ocean and it comes closer to the ocean. So this entire process, we have seen oil spills on the high seas. So disasters can happen, accidents can happen anywhere. So our responsibility in thinking and acting and providing for is not just the core manufacturing side, is how we prepare ourselves. Yeah, if the material comes from a plant in Gujarat or from a plant somewhere in South, or it comes from somewhere overseas, the passage from there to our site, everything is included in the value chain. Let me give you only 2 or 3 highlights to see what could possibly be of interest to us. We cannot switch off responsibility. For instance, in transportation, contamination of chemicals could be a big risk. Though you rely on the supplier, you rely on the shipping company, or you rely on transportation, any tanker, you cannot use chemicals which are non-compatible, which might trigger a reaction. So the need, because some of these incidents have happened in the early days due to this, basically, like the previous chemical transported was not compatible, and that triggered a reaction and that went out of control. So you start there. Storage is classic example was just the Vizag incident. It was an incident caused by storage and taking care in storage. Yeah, some of those simple things we all do it. It's not just liquids; it's also solids. I'm talking about liquids is a different cup of tea, and solids are a different cup of tea. Is that first in, first out? What do we need? What temperature? What humidity? There are so many chemicals which can react at a different ambient temperature. So you need to keep them chill. You should not let them get heated up. You need to ventilate. There are conditions which need to be met. So storage is not just having a floor space. It goes, the entire storage itself needs to be, it's a science by itself. It needs to be protected properly. It needs to be handled properly. For instance, any vita, if you know that it is likely to polymerize, then over a period of time, inhibition. So you have mitigating actions, you have preventive actions in storage. And the big issue is not the big storages, because these are again taken care by well-trained people, good assets, good controls. Now we need to translate it down to small storages and small transportation. So usually the big ones are better handled because they're trained people operating it. But let's move to the smaller, and suddenly you will find on a road a small truck, a Tata Ace kind of a truck carrying barrels. And how much does this driver know what he is carrying? and what are the barrels in this, what kind of barrels have been put together in that, and if this meets with an accident, where are we? So I think, like fortunately, we have been lucky that there are not too many incidents, but then we are not preparing to avoid. And this is what my goal is here today, that the transportation, big systems and big companies are good. They could get better, put more thoughts. For instance, I want to give another anecdote. Training the drivers who are driving our chemicals. I'll give you an example, a little bit old example, few years, 3-4 years in Vizag. Somebody was transporting methanol from the port, and the driver was given a small can for testing purposes, and somewhere the driver got curious. He opened and it smelled like alcohol, and he sold it on the highway, and people who drank in the village, some of them lost lives. Yeah, the point is the driver should have been, probably in future, all companies need to take a 30-second education before the truck leaves. Give the driver the information. You can't expect him to know about chemistry in all its details. He needs to know this trip, what you're carrying, what you need to do, and be careful about what and where to call for help. And of course, we give a lot of documents to be compliant, on the way, but we need to educate at the lowest level who's a driver of a tanker. That there are people driving chlorine tankers on the highway, and they should know how to handle. There is ethylene, which is driven 200, 300 kilometers with a lot of escorts. So those are the beautifully handled parts, but we need to take it down to see what we do see on roads and the daily life, and see how can we make the entire logistics, supply chain, transportation, and storage at that level much safer. That's from there. I just probably would like to move after a chemical industry processes. The chemical industry could get raw material from a non-chemical industry. For instance, like the famous metal company was also producing sulfuric acid as a byproduct, and that is not their core business. So it comes from suppliers who may not be in the same industry, and our products can go to industries which may not be calling themselves chemical industry. For instance, most of the FMCG products are chemicals, but they're not trained to think like chemical companies. So you need to now look for, where does your product go? If your product goes to a direct end consumer, you have to make sure that there are enough instructions, how it travels, how it is stored, and how they use it. If it goes to another B2B kind of a situation, you need to see if that is a small or a medium enterprise. You need to probably educate them in this process. And I'm coming to the responsible care at the end of this topic. You need to go ahead and make sure that your customer or consumer or the one who takes the product from you is equally educated about how to handle, store, and use the product. And finally, if your product is going to a completely different industry, in a steel plant, you have water treatment chemicals. Some of them are biocides too. So those industries may not be the best geared in understanding chemistry. So you need to go to industries which are using chemicals, but that's not their core competency, and make sure. So it is the value chain. It doesn't end with you, from you to another chemical industry. It can go to a consumer. It can go to another chemical industry player. It can go to another industry completely different. That's the beauty of it. Chemical industries applications go everywhere. So how do we try to put this together? I think, like there are a couple of voluntary initiatives. The chemical industry is using it, and this is a very good example. Unfortunately, not adopted by many people yet in the industry. For instance, responsible care talks about continuous improvement in safe chemical management. That's a principle for responsible care. Once you sign up, then you go through your audit and you keep yourself trained continuously, upgrade, and all this stuff. There are about 50, 60 companies, but I would love to see a day where every chemical operation, however small, medium, is part of the responsible care as a whole concept, or take advice from experts in the industry. DuPont is one of them here, who have the expertise to give. Not all of us can have the expertise in-house. Somewhere you can. If your operation is critical, you could take it from else. Then there is a transportation safety organization called Nicer Globe. Because how do you handle a truck going upside down somewhere on a highway 40 kilometers from the nearest village, and how do you rescue and how do you mitigate it? So you need help. So what is not in your competency and what is not in your capability, we should take help, because it's impossible for all of us to have all the expertise. When it comes to safety, we need to invest. We need to think about it, we need to invest it, and then we have to make sure that it is a repeated, because a 10 years investment, and if there's no incident, is actually success of that investment. One should not think, like, okay, there has been no incident, like, why don't we to tone down the investment? No, it's actually the proof that it has worked. So I would like to conclude that there are many risk considerations. I just spoken about a few of them. Risk is always there. How to minimize should be the goal. How to invest and take care proactively. How to think about it, talk about it, and make sure that every layer of people involved are trained, including a driver with a 60-second briefing properly before he goes with his truck carrying chemicals. With that, I would like to stop and probably invite questions at the end of it. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It was my pleasure to speak today.
Thank you, Mr. JR. I think you covered the subject of distribution safety very well, starting from the storage of chemicals, logistics, education of people who handle it, and finally the consumers who would be using it across the diverse industry. And I think your appeal, which is adopt responsible care and also for transportation safety, I hope all our participants take this appeal seriously, because that will make a step change in our industry. And so take help and need to invest. Don't consider it as cost, but need to invest for our future. Thank you, Mr. JR. Our next speaker is Mr. V.V. Surya Rao. He is the head of safety in Reliance Industries. Mr. Surya Rao says he's 77 years young, and he's well reputed in the industry, in the hydrocarbon industry, and he has a vast experience of 56 years. And he has seen many things in life. And so I'm going to just invite him and say, sir, please speak to us, and what more can we do while learning from the incidents which we have seen in the industry in the past years. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Now let me share my screen. Let me share my screen 1 minute. Share, okay. Screen. Is it visible?
Not yet, sir.
So Manika can flash
I
it.
can,
Yeah.
I can share it for you.
Okay, now take over.
Sure, sir.
Right, the second slide, please. Can you start the second slide?
Yes, sir, sharing.
Okay, I'm handling it from here. The question is, are we learning from industrial accidents? Let me start with gratitude, because I learned from our founder chairman, Sri Dhirubhai Ambani. You must start first expressing gratitude to FICCI and DSS, because in the passion to listen to my own voice, I may forget to express my gratitude. It is a unique honor and recognition to Reliance, and I'd like to dedicate my communication to the memory of all skeletons in my cupboard throughout my 56 years of industrial experience. Now I learned something from Isaac Newton. What he said is, every body perseveres in a state of rest or of uniformity, moving forward except insofar as it is compelled by a change in its state by force impressed. What does it mean? It means all plants are supposed to run steadily. When they're running, they are safe. Now, but what really determines, I would like to focus on only one item, which is spoken by many people in the world. It is called the culture that determines the safety performance of an organization. What is culture? Now, culture for me is shared values. It is not enough if the values are in the books or in the boardrooms. They should be visible in the field, like in ExxonMobil, where it says no one gets hurt, or like in DuPont Goal Zero. It should be visible everywhere for every contractor, employee, own employee, asset facing to see it. Shared belief, as one of my predecessors said, there is no job without a risk. This must be a belief, but all risks can be managed. These all should be displayed. It cannot be in the books, it cannot be in the computers of the people or in the boardroom on the notice boards. Third one is, it is the consistently demonstrated behavior when no one is observing. The culture is the behavior, and people should know what is acceptable and what is unacceptable behavior in writing and prominently displayed everywhere when they are working. And of course, you have the shared rituals as you are having today or tomorrow, National Safety Day and other things. And lastly, shared scriptures, respect for procedures. In my experience, all procedures are useless because they do not speak of the consequences of people not following the procedure. Now, who is getting hurt? Asset-facing employees, most contractor employees, public living outside, or the rescuers who go rushing to the place not knowing what the risk. And who do not get injured? Employees within the organization, if it is HTM. No one in Bhopal is injured inside the company, and no one in Vizag is injured inside the company. I have a universal religion, which I think this is the one which combines everybody. Every individual, whether black or white, American or Indian or Chinese or African, comes to work with 206 bones and only with 206 bones. And he would like to go back with 206 bones. And he comes with 37 degrees centigrade body temperature. It doesn't make a difference. And he would like to go back with the same 37 degrees. And he generally comes with 5 liters of blood, and he would like to go back with 5 liters of blood. If you combine 206 and 37 and 5, you get 248. That is the universal religion. Everybody comes to work with 248 and would like to go home with 248. As far as I am concerned in my life, I have never seen people getting injured. I only saw people being injured. People they don't die. Nobody comes to work to go home dead. All accidents are man-made. 80% as per DuPont are unsafe acts of own, 16% are unsafe acts of somebody else, and the remaining 4% are also unsafe acts of God, whether it is tsunami, cyclone, or storm, whatever you want to call it. How many people come to work to go home hurt? None. How many people come to work to make others go home hurt? None. Then why do accidents occur? If you don't know why accidents occur, you cannot prevent accidents. I learned from Socrates, knowledge is virtue and ignorance is sin. Now, what is really the issue? The issue is demonstrated right behavior. First time, every time, when none is observing and delivering consistently the right outcomes in a right manner. That is a competency. If people have the competency both inside the company and outside the company, there cannot be injuries. There may be things. Now, 1 second. Sorry, let me just go back. Right. Now, what you can give in a classroom, in a training center, is only an awareness. At the best, on-the-job training can also give you knowledge. But at the best, it gives you risk awareness. What you what is the risk. However, it does not give you risk consciousness. At the time of doing the job, you need the consciousness. That is what is missing. DuPont Stop Audit is the best tool in the world for converting risk awareness to risk consciousness. The genetic wisdom is you need a stimulus in the field to get a response. In a digital world, you can give a tool that delivers the knowledge just in time. Why no one gets injured in the factory? Why public was affected? Community awareness and emergency response are absent in this country. So we discuss about competency. Now in the pandemic wisdom, a running plant is safe, a shutting down plant is dangerous, a starting up plant is more dangerous, but the utmost dangerous thing is mothballed long duration shutdown plant like in Vizag that happened. The only wisdom when somebody asks me, how do you restart a plant? My answer is re-shut down the shutdown plant again safely, restart following the procedures, start up by carrying out pre-commissioning and commissioning as though you're starting a new plant. What is the current culture of the chemical industry? This is the culture. If I am safe, I don't care about my neighbors. But there is an LOC in Dahej. 2 people died in a neighboring factory 1.5 kilometers away. You cannot have safety management confined only to your own company. You must have a safety management for the whole industrial park. Are you safe? Is your neighbor safe? Is the country safe? Is the world safe? For me, the real challenge is global warming will put the chemical industry out of business if quick mitigative steps are not taken. And finally, the last slide. If history repeats itself, and unexpected always happens, how incapable must man be of learning from experience? With that, I would like to close. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Surya, for your presentation and sharing. You covered a number of items about culture, shared values, the religion of 248. That's a great learning. We all come with 248 and we want to go back with 248. And you really mentioned about the responsibility of safety, just not within the boundaries, but it extends beyond our boundaries to the world around us. So thank you very much, sir. Our next speaker is Mr. Rupak Saraswat. He's the CEO India Glycol Limited. And prior to this, he was the managing director for Transpec Silox. And he has about 25 years of experience in the chemical manufacturing domain in various roles of operations, supply chain, and business management. And in his leadership position, he has seen, the whole gamut of chemical manufacturing. So, and the business impact which has come from safety incidents. So, Mr. Rupak, kindly share with us what is the safety incident impact on business and the far-reaching consequences it has on the supply chain of a business. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Joseph, and thank you, Vicky, for giving me this opportunity to share on what is an extremely important topic. And it was a pleasure hearing some of my esteemed panelists before. But I will try and give a perspective. So the National Safety Day generally focuses on occupational health and safety, and rightly so. However, if you look at environment, health, and safety, they are not too different from each other. The reason I say this is that if we cause harm in the shorter term, generally it is safety. If we do things to cause harm over the longer term, we call it health. And if we cause harm to people and life around us, we call it environment. So the fundamentals of how this is managed in terms of culture, leadership, management processes is very similar, and therefore it is no accident that many times they are all managed together. Now, to give a perspective, sometimes I wonder that we have to repeatedly talk about business impact and business case, essentially because you want me or others to persuade people to not ignore this and make the necessary investment. So let me give some numbers. On an average, over a period of time, this was a data for about 10 years, terrorism killed about 40,000 people per year. On an average, for natural disasters over 10 years, they killed about 65,000 people per year. And if you look at the wars that happened between 1955, remember, I have excluded the World War period. And 2012, 54 lakh people died. So we are saying wars on an average were killing 1 lakh people per year. Very recently, the entire world has been paralyzed by COVID. And I was just looking at the numbers yesterday, and correct me if I am wrong, COVID has so far killed 25 lakh people in the world. Now, what will surprise us is that work-related accidents and illnesses actually kill 28 lakh people per year, which is more than COVID. To keep things in perspective, this is 70 times more than what terrorism kills, 40 times more than what natural disasters do, 28 times more than what wars do, and of a similar level that COVID has done over the last 1 year. And out of those 28 lakhs, roughly 4 to 5 lakhs are accident related and the remaining are illness related, out of which about 10 lakhs are due to exposure to hazardous substances. Now, if you ask me, each life, irrespective of how it is lost, these are all, most of them except the natural disasters are human factors, maybe COVID isn't, is equally important. So why do we need to talk about it as much? ILO estimated that 31 crore people are affected by non-fatal accidents every year. And the direct costs, which includes compensation, medical costs, cost of loss of production, is about $3 trillion per year, which is about 4% of the GDP. And I'm not even talking about the invisible elephant, which is the indirect costs. And, this is getting a helicopter view and what it looks like on an overall basis. And when you come to specifics, we all know things go wrong and things go very wrong, and they've gone very wrong in the world and they've been going wrong in India. And that's the reason why we're talking about it. To, jog the memories of some youngsters who may be sitting here, I'm sure people on the panel, many of us know about it. Bhopal, for example, killed 20,000 people. It completely destroyed Union Carbide globally. And many people continue to suffer even now. And in terms of reputational damage, there's a company which acquired Union Carbide. They left behind the Indian entity. Yet, a few years ago, IITians and alumni were campaigning for that company to be not allowed on the IIT campuses. So we are talking 30 years down the line, the kind of reputational damage that it does. Piper Alpha, an offshore incident, 167 people died. The cost estimated was $3.4 billion back then. It happened because, a person was trying to inspect 100 different valves. He did not replace one which was faulty. The Prestige oil spill is estimated to have cost a loss of $12 billion. And the biggest of them all, even if one of that was avoided, Chernobyl, has led to 1.25 lakh deaths, 17 lakh people directly impacted, 50% of Ukraine contaminated, and an estimated cost of $200 billion. And mind you, this costs that we're talking about are far lesser than what it really costs to undo the impact of an incident. Now, so the business impact, even though I have not put numbers on direct businesses, should be quite obvious. You might have heard, especially in lower cost countries like India, that look, life is cheap here. So what does that mean? Does it mean that safety is a cost? Or does it mean that, not spending on safety provides us a competitive advantage? The answer to both of them, in my opinion, is a big no. And I'll try and tell you as to why it is a big no. Now, when we've seen winning ecosystems, be it Japan, be it Germany, be it a specific industry, or be it a specific company, think about Singapore Airlines, for example. Or think about Toyota, for example, while I talk about this. Are they great in terms of sustained profits? Yes. Are they some of the most efficient companies? Yes. Are they some of the best in terms of quality? Yes. Are they some of the best in terms of investing in technology and being progressive? Yes. And had safety been a cost, are they best in terms of safety standards? The answer is yes. So you'll generally find that the character, the mind, the focus, the skills which are required to drive safety leadership is exactly the same. And there is no significant winning ecosystem or organization which has seen safety as a cost. Now, we are talking about the cost. I want people to also think about the invisible elephant, which is often not thought about. The direct cost is the rat. We will not incur those costs if we invest in safety. But to me, the invisible elephant is more important. Because in order to run a successful organization, or in order to have a great safety record, what do you need? You need to know your science. You need to know how to run your processes well. You need to have good management processes in place. You need to have the right kind of leadership values, the right kind of leadership. You need to have motivated people. So doesn't it exactly match with what is required for organizations which need to be high quality, high morale, high efficiency, and high performance? And this is exactly what happens. When you focus on this, for example, there is a knock-on, a cascading, a multiplier impact on all of these. And that is why winning ecosystems also work with high standards in safety. There's a saying that companies don't compete, people compete. We all keep hearing that people are our most important assets. But then what is most important for people other than, as very well described by the speaker before me, we want them to go back with the same amount of blood, the same number of bones. Their life is most important. So we could not be talking about morale and motivation if that wasn't an neglected area. So the question is, if it is so obvious, why are we not able to learn as well as we think? I'll try and give some thoughts. I think the number one thing, as was already talked about, is leadership. Now, I will ask a question to yourselves and people who are here. How many of you have heard these cliched statements? What does not allow you to sleep at night? The immediate answer and the great answer is safety. What is the most important for you and therefore the first thing on your slide? The immediate answer and the most politically correct answer is safety. Now, my question to the organizations and people here is, therefore, do you put your best leaders at the place and in the area which does not allow you to get sleep and something which is the most important for the organization? Unfortunately, too frequently the answer is no. You put your best commandos where you think you have the biggest issues. I remember how Jack Welch drove quality. If he thought quality was the most important for his organization, his leaders, his best people became quality leaders, and that became a badge of honor. How far are we from that? I think there's a long way to go. The other thing is, particularly these days, the culture of shortcut management. It is misused jugaad to that extent. Jugaad is not a bad word when it comes to innovation. But there is a plant that I'm putting up, and there's a process engineer who comes up and says, look, we should do a layer of protection analysis, a hazard study. It'll cost us that much. But there's another smart guy who comes over. कि सर कुछ नहीं होगा, मैं कर देता हूँ, 3 हफ्ते का unnecessary delay हो जाएगा, business हाथ से जाएगा. What's the decision that you take? Knowingly or unknowingly, when this behavior is encouraged, that is why we don't learn, even though the knowledge exists. The other thing is that, developing this culture, again, the speaker before me also talked about the importance of culture. It's a bagicha that you nurture over a period of time. It needs training, it needs rigor, it needs perseverance. And we all realize that irrespective of how many ISO certificates that we have, a Toyota is not created by putting a slogan on the wall. And I think that's a challenge. That's a cultural challenge. The other thing is a culture about all is well, in the sense that, we like people who say things that we want to hear, and not people who would point out challenges which we might find difficult to handle, unless, of course, a big accident happens, and then safety becomes our top priority. I suppose in countries like India, authorities can be very knowledgeable partners. Again, I will ask 2 questions here, or 1 question. When we work with, for example, in good multinationals, when we work with our EHS functions, the language that we use is we are working with EHS. Whereas when we are dealing with authorities, invariably the language that you use is we are managing authorities. Shouldn't it be we are working with authorities? So I think we ought to work on creating systems where the authorities become knowledgeable partners. I believe there is a huge need to create a autonomous safety process safety body with a number of people who bring expertise from outside. They may be on deputation. A number of people might do it for doing well for the nation and the world. We just don't have that. And when it comes to penalties, typically we end up picking up the factory manager or the occupier. I think we need to look at much broader than that in terms of reward as well as punishment. Businesses understand value, and that value should not be a post-mortem. I think that needs to be something that needs to come on the process of evolution. To end my comments, I would like to talk about bottom line. I was asked whether there's a business case for safety, and I wonder whether that's the right topic in the first place. I was once looking at a investigation of Piper Alpha. This was way 20 years ago, and the investigator concluded the investigation by a line which stuck with me, and I hope it is something that appeals to all of you. I found it very inspiring. Look, there are many benefits of investing in safety. It reduces costs, it improves morale, it allows you to comply, it helps you with your reputation, it helps you improve profits. But the most important of that is what that gentleman said towards the end of the investigation. It is, which I found most inspiring, the bottom line of safety is life. I also remember Mr. Ratan Tata once getting interviewed, and somebody was asking him a question. Look, you are doing so much for the society and so on and so forth, and you don't disclose it so openly. And don't some stakeholders ask you whether it impacts your bottom line? And before I tell you about what he said, we talked about the environment and the risks that it poses to life as such. It is extremely, extremely severe. And what Mr. Ratan Tata said was, depends on what is the bottom line for you. So I think when we look at the huge impact that safety has had in terms of accidents and the positive impact that investing in safety or health can have for our businesses, we probably should not be asking for a business case for safety, because the society is beginning to ask, at least some of us, the life case for business. So with that, I would conclude my presentation, and thank you all for listening to me and giving me the time.
Thank you, Mr. Rupak, for the challenging questions you have put forth for the leadership, and the final statement on bottom line of safety is life. I think that's a key learning for me today, that the bottom line for safety is life. With that, I would like to invite Shri K.K. Srivastava, of Director DCPC. And so, as you know, India is opening up to more investment in the area of specialty chemicals and pharma and other industries, and the emphasis of Make in India and Atmanirbhar. I think the government is opening up the economy for investment. So can you share with us how the government is responding to ensure that such incidents don't happen in the future in terms of policy enforcement, and what support is provided to the industry in this regard? Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Am I audible now? Am I audible?
If you can come closer to the mic, it will be helpful.
Am I audible now? Am I audible now?
Yes, please go ahead.
You are partially audible. If you can speak a little louder, will be better.
Okay, sir. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Vicky for giving this department an
Still not clear.
to be a part of this event. And actually, a business secretary is coming from because was supposed to attend this session, but due to the engagement with some PMO meeting, we could not attend the event today. So on this behalf, I am presenting the department. First of all, I am very grateful to be a part of this.
Srivastava, can you keep the mic closer to your mouth?
Just a minute. fine now? Hello? Am I audible now?
Little better, but still it's very feeble. Your
Hello?
voice is not loud and clear.
Hello? Hello? Is it audible now?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes,
Am
sir,
I
we can
audible
try.
now? Am I audible now?
Yes, please go ahead, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, some connection problem was there. Actually, I am very glad to be a part of this event, and I really got the key inputs from the event, and what are the 50 aspects which are being covered. So far as first of all, I would like to bring out the overall picture of the industry. As the chemical sector is one of the key contributors to the GDP of the country, and it accounts for nearly 7% of the GDP from the chemical sector, and the weightage of this sector of industry production is
Sorry, it's not audible at all. I don't know if others are able to hear. Even
Hello? Can I? Hello? Is it fine now?
So can you reconnect? I think that's the only thing that
Oh,
we've tried.
FICCI team, can somebody help? FICCI team?
I'll just check with him, please.
I think we'll wait for a minute.
Yes, please.
Maybe you should switch off the video and go to voice.
hello. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Perfect.
Hello? Is it better now?
Yes, let's try.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, first
But
of
speak
all,
little louder if possible, because it's not so clear.
okay. First of all, I would like to thank everybody for giving the valuable input for on the safety aspect. Is it fine now? Voice is okay?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, as you people must be aware that after this incident of Bhopal which occurred on the 2 and 3rd January in December 1984, the Government of India brought the Environment Protection Act between 1986 to have the better and to cover the human safety and environment safety. And thereafter, government also introduced two sets of rules, which was NSI rules and CAPER rules for accident preparedness. Under this MSIST rules, government has identified 684 chemicals based on the toxicity and flammability which are covered under MSIST, and based on the threshold criteria, certain installations have been characterized as the major accident hazard. Nearly in India, there are 861 major accident hazards, and hello, hello. Major installations are there across the country, and for to now the cabinet secretary initiated a process to which the Department of Chemical Resources to regulate these sectors, and for this purpose, we were requested to formulate an omnibus chemical regulation. This omnibus chemical regulation was introduced, was being prepared with the purpose to substitute the two existing rules, which is MSIST rule and The other one is capable. The objective behind rules which are being drafted and those have already been circulated with the industry association is to ensure a high level of protection to human health and environment from the risk that is posed by the chemicals. To prescribe and monitor the hello. Hello, is it fine now?
So it's difficult to hear.
Srivastava sir, I think you're not properly audible. It seems you have connected from two devices.
No, ma'am,
Yes,
already only one device I have connected from.
we could see from two login, but I would request if you can just see because you're not clearly audible.
Okay, just a minute. Just a minute. क्या बोलिए कितनी काम हो जाता है
So you may try now. I think now you are from one device only, logged in through one device only.
Am I audible now?
Manish, can you hear now? It seems better or?
Well, hardly. It's very feeble. The voice is very feeble.
Can I speak
So I think
louder and is it coming properly?
he can remove the mic and let the device speaker work probably. Headphone निकाल
Directly.
के हाँ directly बात
Directly.
करेंगे शायद.
Am I audible now?
Yes, better.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Thank you for your patience. Actually, I was discussing this issue. Is it fine now? Voice is okay now? Am I audible now?
So much better.
Okay, thank you, madam. Madam, actually, this I was discussing this regarding this initiation of the process for the management and safety rules in the chemical and petrochemical sector. In this rules, we have we have already submitted the draft industry association, and our primary concern is to regulate the sector and also to ensure the safety aspect of the related with the chemical industry. So in the safety, in the draft management safety rules, the objective we have already highlighted, which is to ensure the high level of protection to human health and care, health and environment, and to prescribe and monitor the labeling and packaging requirements. Because when we were discussing the matter with the authority, since safety is a vital aspect, and most of the part is the Ministry of Labor, and some other agencies are also involved, such as job safety is there, state authorities are there. So to bring in the coherence between these agencies, because too many agencies and the work is not being properly monitored. So in order to, we had a discussion with those agencies, and we also tried to have a, we came to know that the safety aspect is not being properly addressed while the transportation of the chemicals is taking place. Mr. Janardhan has already pointed out this aspect, and it is very vital aspect, because if some truck is going on by road and it contaminates some portion of the water body which is going through that area. So it can really have a very wide and severe impact on the health of the persons who are coming in contact with it. So we are in the draft safety management tools, we are also trying to address these kind of aspects. The state authorities are also roped in, and we have already discussed the issues relating to the LP pollution incident, Bhopal incident. But if we were forgetting the issue which came up in the Beirut accident, where ammonium nitrate which was stored in the dock was exploded, and the similar situation was in India also. And in the Chennai port there was a cluster which was kept in the port, and the authority, when we came to know that, he directed the concerned authority to take proper action, and the matter, the ammonium nitrate which was lying there was removed immediately, and to the safer unit which was with the help of PASO we did this activity. So our aspect in the Department of Chemicals is to really provide a groundwork, and not only we are having the discussion, the HPC was constituted to investigate the issue which occurred in Visakhapatnam. We also had a discussion with the industry as well as some of the government agencies regarding constitution of the state level state level body for safety aspect only. But later on, it was decided that it is not feasible to have too many bodies at the state level for better implementation of the rules. So we also try to incorporate those things, and in the meanwhile, we have been getting the proposal from the Ministry of Environment that it will be better if the centralized agency in the National Chemical Authority, which is proposed in the Chemical Agency, if that can look after the work and provide the technical guidance to the industry for better management of the chemicals, then this National Chemical Authority will issue the directions to the industry and how to mitigate the effect of adverse effect of chemicals. Moreover, the department is also trying to incorporate the health analysis in the site safety report, which will be a part of the report which will be submitted to the authority for its consideration. Basically, what I feel personally is that it is not possible that only by reporting the accident can be avoided. It is the honors of the industry that it should take the proper action, because to take the remedial action is not the objective of our security safety action. Our objective is to prevent the incident. If we are successful in preventing the actions, we don't require any post-accident measures which need to be taken. So I feel that there must be the authorities as well as the industry associations should come together, and we should try to mitigate the impact and to avoid the risk which can be posed by the certain hazardous chemicals. And with these words, I would like to say thank you to Vicky for giving me the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sri Srivastava, for sharing what you have just concluded, saying that prevention is the key. I think that is where we are all working to, that prevention is our priority in terms of our safety and to ensure that businesses and supply chains operate safely. So thank you very much for sharing. We have a few questions which has come in. I would just like to share on behalf of the participants. And so the first question is to you, to Dr. Krishnan. The question is, how much did safety, culture, or governance contribute to the LG incident? Dr. Krishnan, was it clear?
Can you repeat? Can you repeat?
Yes, I can repeat. Question is, how much did safety, culture, or governance contribute to the LG incident?
The safety culture is a must. Unless you have a safety culture, you cannot prevent accidents. That is one thing. And another one, you should also because complete lockdown is a total due to many factories as well as rules which they have quite for a long time, but further the safety can be enhanced.
Thank you, Dr. Krishnan. The next question I have is to all the panelists. Anybody can take up this. Should a high-ranking safety person be represented in boardrooms of Indian companies? What we see is mostly it is from business or finance. But the question is, should a person with safety, a person be represented in a boardroom?
Maybe since, after waiting for a few seconds, I think it is not the status of where it is to be recognized. Like, safety needs a status at a boardroom level to be recognized. I heard Mr. Rao and Rupak mention you have your commandos, put your best people in those kind of places, and that is what is going to take care of that and give the right importance. And the culture that the best people are involved in safety is something which is a recognition by itself. Of course, this is a very common question. What all should be represented in board to get the due recognition? I find that not the right way to look at it. That is not the ultimate recognition. The question is that a route to enter a board? Yeah, it is a difficult question because safety itself is a 24/7 job. You might get only paid for 8 hours, but anybody who's in that role is a 24/7 job. You need passion, and you need expertise, and you need to lead the organization with a culture. So the right question for me would be that, is safety recognized by the top management and given its due investments, given its due credentials, given its right support for what needs to be done? That is a measure for me, the top leadership approach towards safety rather than how safety job is recognized in the management.
Mr. Surya, you might be on mute.
Right. Can I give a counterpoint? If you want to build a sustainable organization, you need three things: people, profit, and planet. So you need three different verticals in the board. Right, because the board is accountable to the shareholders for sustainability. You call it as chief sustainable officer, I don't mind it, but there should be a voice that is heard at the board level. That's my view.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Surya Rao. So, Rupak, this question is to you. It says, what are the psychological factors of high number of incidents in India? Can such webinar reduce, or we need to work at ground level people to help people improve their psychological condition to reduce incidents?
I am not sure whether I'm going to comment on the psychological condition. And I think the webinar is one small bit in terms of how we are trying to engage with people to convey how important it is. In my view, action does not necessarily happen when you've got loads of information and knowledge. Action happens when there's a strong sankalpa. And when the strong sankalpa comes, knowledge gets acquired. And that is the role of leadership. And it is kind of linked to the earlier question with respect to whether safety should be on the board. The answer is a big yes, but it is not necessarily that he should be a safety professional. But we need somebody who's passionate, committed, and accountable right at the board level to something that is the most important. I only partly answered your questions. It will be difficult to summarize as to what are the psychological reasons for high accidents in India. To some extent, we have cultural issues. We have some challenges, some of which I talked about in my presentation, which is a mindset that it's a cost, which is a mindset that life is cheap, which is a mindset that not spending on safety provides us competitive advantage, which is the mindset that I can get away with that. And I think that is part of the psychological mindset, and we leaders and all of you have to help us change that.
Thank you. So Mr. Surya Rao, sir, there's a question for you. It says, very insightful discussion. We have experienced and learned few things hard way. We know there are weak links in our value chain. Why as a country we are not able to focus on the critical business risk?
Repeat the last part.
Why as a country we are not able to focus on this critical business risk?
Right. I will give you my understanding of the subject. So far, we have been bashing up leadership, etc. However, it is time India is literate. You should be able to transfer the ownership of risk to the employee who is facing the asset and not put some CEO in a jail. That will not get you the thing. I think we have to have the bottoms up, educating the people and transferring the ownership of risk as an obligation to their family and not to their company. That, my view, is what is required, which we should drive, and it is possible. Nobody takes a shortcut. I do not believe it. Their focus is they don't want to go home dead, but their focus at the time of the job is on the task, not on his safety. That is the reason I said you need risk consciousness has to be brought by only his immediate supervisor. Do not waste time trying to say the managing director will go to the jail. It doesn't affect him. That's my view. If you can transfer the ownership of risks to the employee facing the risk and make his sankalp to go back his home for his family and hold his immediate L1 only accountable. Don't worry about others. You can put this. I'm not against the chairman being put in a jail, but that will not solve. That's my answer.
Thank you, sir. That's the questions I had through the communication I've received. If there's any other question. If not, I'd like to hand over to Manish to propose a vote of thanks.
Great. I think exciting, wonderful learning experience for each of us. I think there was a lot of emphasis which was on mindset and behavior, a lot of emphasis revolving around taking ownership and responsibility of the work and work area you are doing. It's not just as Surya Rao just mentioned that not just the uh, ownership of the leaders to communicate and say, but also the ground level. So we've got two different perspectives. One from Rupert, where he said that the responsibility of the leader as a leader, not just a lip services, but actually implementing it in its heart and soul way, and effectively doing safety as one of the ritual, and implementing all the related not just compliance point of view, but from business point of view, risk mitigation strategies and work. And from Surya Rao, sir, we heard that it is not just the top lead, but so it's a wonderful session. Each of us really, I'm sure, have enriched themselves as discussed that webinar is just a way or mode of communication, not going to transform you overnight. But if any of these learnings, if you take to your heart, make a sankalp, then I think the transformation begins there. So on this context, I would like to thank each and every speaker on the panel who contributed to this session and made it great. Would like to give a special thanks to Shri Kanishkant Srivastav, who substituted Shri Samir Biswas, Additional Secretary. It was unfortunate that we couldn't hear you clearly, but sir, if you can share your speech to the audience, would be great. And would like to thank FICCI team led by Manoj and Rinki for supporting this whole initiative. To everyone, stay safe, stay healthy, and most important, stay committed to yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay safe. Bye.